Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's the Jade Gemini. This afternoon, I'm super excited to bring you a video of this guy right here. This is the ever-loved, ever-famous Seiko 5 SNK809. And today, we're going to talk about what I like, what I love, what I dislike, and if it applies, what is rubbish about this little watch right here. Before we do so, let's go to get some size comparisons out of the way. First, we're going to take a look at a watch that, well, is probably the most common model of watch on the planet, and this is the Apple Watch, right? But this is a good indication in case somebody in your family has one. You can have an idea of what this size is. So this is a 40 millimeter or 41 millimeter Apple Watch. So Apple Watches have a short lug to lug, and I think they even measure across this way, like a phone screen, and not this way, like normal watches are measured. Next, another very common watch, which could probably rival the Apple Watch. This is, of course, the GW-M5610, but you could just, the standard G square, right? So this gives you a good idea of size, both in thickness as well as the width. And then last is sort of a standardized field watch as well that is quite a bit bigger. This is the Bertucci A2T, and you get an idea of the thickness. So as you can see, although similar in design as a lot of field watches are, this is quite a bit thinner. Overall dimensions on this guy, I think, are about 36.5 width. Lug to lug, I think it's about 34, 35. And then the nice part is the thickness is about 8.7, somewhere in there. So it's thin. It's very small. It can fit on anyone's wrist. And yeah, it's great. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right in to the SNK809. So the first thing that I like about the SNK809, especially in this crazy world that we live in, where everything is so much more expensive and so much more expensive, and that again, right, with this inflation, it has remained pretty universally affordable, you know, with everything going on. The original the original Seiko 5 was designed to be this very affordable, everyday watch that met specific criteria. It being automatic, it having a crown at the 4 o'clock, which sometimes, you know, is broken, but it having that, it having some water resistance as well, and there was two other things. Can't exactly remember those, but essentially these different points that made it a good everyday watch. You know, had water resistance, wasn't automatic with, you know, Seiko's proprietary technology, which we'll talk about, so on and so forth, right? So this made a formula for a lot of good watches. And some of those watches have went up in price, and some of them have not really had any popularity, so they're lower in price. This, even though it has the popularity, has stayed right in the middle. So that's the first thing to like. They are below $150. I think we're still seeing them in the $120 to $130 range, which I think for this watch is definitely bang on. I got lucky, and when Amazon same day, or Amazon Now used to be a thing where you could buy something and get it the same day, I got this for $57. So that's pretty cool. So that's the first thing that I do like a lot about this watch. The next thing that I do like about this watch as well is just kind of to that point. This watch, I will come back to that. The next thing to like is this watch has a lot of Seiko's proprietary technology. So, for example, when I I've got a aftermarket strap on here because the strap that comes with this isn't the best. It'll definitely do the job, but you know, you definitely want to get a different strap. By the way, this is a half strap. This was their, I think, in 1943. It's this great mix between khaki and olive drab. It just looks aged and vintage, and it's canvas. And it just, I feel like, sets this watch off. But one of the cool things that this watch does have, if you can see here, is it has Seiko's magic lever system. And so what this means is, although you have one wheel that turns one way to wind the spring barrel here, as you rotate the watch this way or this way, it has a pusher on one side and a hook on the other side. So if the weight goes like this, it will wind this, I think, to the right. But if it goes like this, it will also still wind this to the right. So this is one of the ingenious technologies that Seiko does put into their watch. You've also got things like Diashock, which definitely works. I've dropped my Alpinist in the tub with its 6R15 movement inside of it, and it, you know, took it on the chin, no problems whatsoever. So you're going to get that quality, you're going to get that reliability for the everyday, day-to-day. The next thing that I do like is the fact that you do have a day-date complication on this, which actually that was the next thing of the one of those fives, is that it had a day-date complication, now that I think about it. But you have that being able to tell you the day and the date right on the dial. I also like that they've kept on Sundays, the red. In the traditional Japanese calendar, not traditional like samurai time, right? But after the war, once they ended up going ahead and becoming more industrialized after World War II, there was a working week where Monday through Friday was white in the calendar. Blue was Saturday, because the idea is that you would half work that day. And some people would have off, right? And then Sunday was considered unanimously a day off. So that's why on Seiko's, and something I always love to see, is that you do get the blue and the red, because it's that pure harken back to Japanese culture, which usually you don't see in other watches because, well, they're not, you know, Japanese brands necessarily. So that's just a little bit of piece of Japanese culture that you do get on this. Unfortunately, the nope. It's got the quick set, which is, didn't mean to talk about that, but it is another thing to love that Seiko does as one of the best, is very easy to set the date when you pick up your watch if it is dead. But as you can see, it's got dual language. This one is, I believe this is Spanish and English, but you might get ones that are English and Arabic, or English and, I think it's kanji, but we'll just say, you know, Japanese, right? But as you can see, once we get to Saturday, it's white on here, not blue, so that is something to note. But red Sunday. So that's another thing to like. You also, I do like the fact, especially if this is coming in at a cheaper price point, I know that sometimes they're a bit of a faux pas. Some people are over them, right? Some people love them, but especially with a simple, non-decorated, you know, more rudimentary movement that's in here, it's not decorated or anything like that. So some people might say, why bother even having the ability to see the movement? However, you know, if you're buying this watch and this is your first, you know, automatic, as it was with mine, as a matter of fact, so that's another reason why this watch is super special to me. And, you know, I think it's about 7 years old now and it's still running perfectly. But it was cool for me, and probably for someone getting into it, to be able to see the inner workings. You just see that Diashock, the, you know, jewel right there sitting. You see the magic lever system, right? Just watch it kind of working away and winding it, sort of understanding how the watch works. Or if you watch, the watch be disassembled or taken out of the case, going, oh, hey, here's that little lever that, you know, relieves the stem, out of the watch itself. Just little things like that, right, is really cool. So that is another thing to like. So overall, lots to like about the watch itself, but even more to love about the watch itself. And so that's what we'll go ahead and get into next. The first thing is that this watch is a strap monster, right? Anything you can throw at this, whether it's navy blues, it is bright colors, it is military, sort of earthy tones, which I really, really like with this, right? NATO's, a leather strap, right? Really whatever you could think of, put this watch on and it's going to look fantastic. Again, this just really sets it off with that military look. And another thing to love is that bead blasted finish with the sort of more utilitarian and, tool watch, aesthetic that this watch has going on. Definitely, just sets it off. And so here is how it looks on the wrist as well. Now I have a 6 and I want to say it's between 6.15 and 6 1/4, inch wrist, right? And it definitely looks small, but at the same time, it looks just right. And I think that's what's great. You could wear this on if you did have a bigger wrist and it'd be more of that tool. Or if you had a smaller wrist, it's going to work great. Another thing to love is, if you or someone, it's a unisex watch. So if you're someone who is a girl, you're going to have no problem whatsoever being able to wear this. Or even if you wanted to get this for, a young kid, right? That smaller lug to love and smaller size is going to be something that they can grow with for responsibility. So if you're 8 years old, 10 years old, showing interest in watches, you could, pick one of these up. And have no sort of problem whatsoever, saying, hey, take care of this, grow with it. They'll fall in love with it. It's going to be good, reliable, everything that we've mentioned already. Just, really, really nice altogether. The other thing to love about that, and sort of to that point, is the legibility of this watch. I absolutely love that as well. So it's so easy. With certain watches, when you look down, you really have to think, wait, okay, so that is this, okay, it's past this 10 point, okay, and this is here, okay, so now I got to add that up. This, it tells you, right? It's like a digital watch, but it's analog, right? So right here, it is 2, right there, and it is 2:07, right? Super duper easy because the internal is the hours, and you can see that that hour marking is right before that, and then this is on the external ring here, and that is the minutes going around. So really, really easy for you to pick up and immediately know what time it is without any sort of problem. It is also a watch that is inspired by a very important watch, and that is the URB and the URB within itself. Flieger watch, sorry. Just completely went out the window there. So this is a tiny mini Flieger. The cut-in curves here with this more rounded design and these sort of tapered down lugs, and of course this dial, as well as these, I want to say sword hands. No, that wouldn't be quite right. But this hand shape here comes right off of the German World War II pilot's watch. But I feel like with the size of this and just overall, this sort of more falls into the field watch territory, which it definitely feels like, and a little bit less of the territory of a pilot's watch, right? But it definitely is based off of the Flieger pilot's watch. Those usually have the triangle at the 12 like this, and then 2 little dots on each side, and it has this dual ring with those exact style hands. So a cool little piece of history that you are getting on this watch, but kind of, it's definitely its own thing. It's a cult classic because of that. Another cool thing, I love that sort of glossy dial that you do get, as well as that satin ring around the outside. You also do get polish here and here, as well as on the bottom of the watch. So just little pops, little Easter eggs, if you will, with the watch by something that, taken at its face value, seems a little bit more tool-tastic, has these little interesting bits and pieces with it. The other thing that I do love, as always, is Seiko's Lumabrite. So, sorry. There we go. Rayleigh Vostede Rook, if you're interested in this. This has definitely got a review coming up. It hasn't left my pocket, so that should tell you what's going on here. But has the great Lumabrite as always, right? Even with the age of this watch being 6 years old, you walk outside, you come in, it's glowing like this in plain daylight, and at night it goes all through the night. You know, absolutely fantastic. Now there is a point of the dial that we will talk about, but you know, as far as this, it's going to glow great. You're going to be able to figure out, you know, what time it is, or if you're in medium to low light, you can still look down, be able to figure it out without needing, you know, some sort of other source to figure out the time. Absolutely fantastic. So these are all just things to love, and I think that sort of just brings it all together. The price, the beautiful design, Seiko's pretty good, you know, fit and finish and consistency that you are going ahead and get in here. Just about all the important things that are there. We'll talk about some of the things that couldn't be, but, you know, again, the value, the technology, the heritage, like I was saying, anything from the calendar to, this is an SNK809. This is like, if you were to say probably top 20 Seiko watches of all time, this would be on that list. It is the most popular Seiko 5 watch out there for a reason. There are certain ones that you put on and they feel like they are, you know, cheap, or they just feel kind of a little lackluster or soulless, a little forgettable. By this, every single time I put it on and I just look at it, I'm just smitten. I'm like, I love this thing. This thing, it would be just as important to me, and maybe I'm a little biased because it was my first automatic, but just as important to me and a piece of history as that one day when I finally do get that Speedmaster, right? It is just, chef's kiss. Now, it isn't perfect, right? Which is definitely the next thing that we will talk about. The first thing we're just staring right out, well, more so staring through, and that is the fact that this is not a sapphire crystal. This is the Hardlex crystal, Seiko's proprietary mineral glass that they then ion infuse or do something to be able to increase the hardness over standard just glass on a window or anything like that. Now, I've never had a problem with it, being the fact that, again, this, 6 years old, doesn't have a single scratch on it, hopefully never will. Now, two really small things I should have said that I do love as well. I'm kind of picky when watches get scratched and everything, but I feel like this bead blasting looks gorgeous with little scratches on it over time. It tells a story. And it just looks nicer than if you have like a polished and you get like a scuff on it, right? So that's one thing. Also, because these are quite cheap and they do use a common movement, these are quite easy to mod. And the reason why I thought about that is because we were talking about this. There is anti-reflective domed crystals, flat crystals, all sorts of different things that you can replace it. But again, somebody who is saying, I can get this watch or I can get some new company, from China, which seems to use the Seiko movement and have good quality, fit and finish, and they have a sapphire crystal. Hey, what am I doing here, right? Again, this was made of a different era of Seiko 5, not their new brand, which offers some value, but it's definitely a step up on the price scale. This is that old, hey, there's the digital Casios, and then the next step up is the Seiko 5s, right, before I start getting into other watches. Again, I don't have a problem with it. I think overall you're getting something that is amazing, but something to keep in mind. The next thing is the fact that with this watch, you are sort of you're staring down the barrel of the possible problems you could get with Seiko's quality control. So this one, amazingly, before I started getting nitpicky and learning to look for things like misaligned hours to minutes hands that don't line up and things like that, this one is perfectly aligned, like perfect, right? So when this gets to 3 o'clock, this is exactly at 3, this is exactly at 12. But I've gotten a new Seiko 5, which you sent back, where when this was at 12, the hour was, this way or this way. So that is something to keep in mind that you might face. Same thing if you bought like a diver and the bezel was not perfectly aligned when it reaches to its next mark. These are just some of the things that, unfortunately Seiko hasn't picked up on and hasn't perfected in their manufacturing, and is still the case with these, that if you get one of these or some of their other flavors of colors, you could run into. To that point, as well, the watch itself, because of its movement that is inside, this uses the 7S26 movement, as you can see there on the dial, which means that this watch has a little bit more of a, again, rudimentary, older generation of movement. So the first thing is when I pull the crown out all the way, it does not hack. Even though this is all the way and I could start adjusting the watch, it cannot hack. So what does that mean if you're watching this because you said, what's a good first watch? And you saw this and you're watching my video. Well, what hacking means is that when you pull out the crown stops. So when you get it at 12, you can get everything perfectly dialed in and then release the time when it strikes 12, so you're perfectly synced up. This movement, the 7S26, does not do this. So this is something that you either set it and it doesn't matter, or like me, if you are meticulous about alignment, you have to wait until it sweeps all the way around to the 12 and perfectly get that hand to touch one of these minute markers, and sort of generally get the correct time within the right minute, but it might be a couple seconds off because you cannot hack the movement. Now there is a trick where you can push back on the crown and it delays the time, but again, you're binding the whole entire system in a direction it's not meant to run, so I would recommend against that personally. The next thing with this movement as well, although durable, it is something that does not have hacking, winding as well. So what that means is that you cannot wind with the stem like this and it power up or get the watch started. You have to do the old Seiko shake where you sit it here and you just let the rotor on the back do all the winding until it gets enough power in the system to start getting the watch to tick and the power for it to move and the whole gear train starts, a flowing. So that is something else to keep in mind that might frustrate and make you think, well, why would I get this instead of just getting one of these new San Martin brands or, something like this. So, in all fairness, something to keep in mind. The other thing is when this comes time to service, this movement is great, and one of the things to love is that these can go 10 to 15 years before needing a service. When it comes time to service, there are certain people that, since they see this as a little bit of a cheaper watch, they might see that as a throwaway part. So the question becomes, is it just better to buy a new watch or buy a whole nother movement than service this movement, because those servicing costs are probably going to cost more than with inflation and everything that would affect that than just buying maybe like a NH35A and converting this to a hacking, which I believe you can do, right? Or just buying a 7S26 out there that is new, right? Again, I would say that that's different for every single person. The memories and things like that have this watch, I'd probably want that everything to stay, original with the original movement and everything, but, something to keep in mind. And overall, these are the kind of things to think about. The last thing that I would say that is important to keep in mind is that the water resistance on this is 30 meters, right? I thought it was 50 meters, and I've been wearing it as such. But, like if I'm cooking and boiling pasta and it's steaming, I will take this off and set it aside, right? I would not recommend swimming with this watch. Definitely not having this in the same room as a shower, right? Maybe just, getting caught in a rainstorm or washing some dishes and splashing is about the most that I would go with this watch. However, I'm probably doing it a disservice as, this is a cheap field style watch. And so there are people that I know friends, my friend Bama, who's on the Discord that I'm a part of, has actually worn this into the sandbox. Thank you for his service, right? And come back, and his 7S26, works or his, SNK809 that he has survived that, and he still has that watch to this day. So they're probably a little bit more durable than we give them credit for, but again, just take caution. But all of this being said, there's nothing rubbish really about this watch whatsoever. So this leads me to the end. This watch is, regardless of my, I'm trying to be unbiased, right? It's an amazing watch, even if it is my first watch, and that is something that is truly special to me as this watch. I think that this is a winning formula, period, even in 2023 with the higher price. You could argue that stats-wise, there are other watches that you could look into, but we know that with everything in this hobby, stats alone or logic alone, right, just looking at a paper, don't make every deciding factor. And because the sort of history, the sort of cult following that these watches have, the quality that you are going to get that is going to work, that is going to last, you are buying a real, not an homage to something. Well, you're buying an homage to something else, but again, it's morphed into its own thing and have enough changes. Being an homage of a Flieger, right? You have all these different amazing things that make this, like I said, one of the greatest, in my opinion, 20 Seiko watches that have ever existed in the top 20 or top 30 or whatever. And I think it should be, if you like the way the watch looks, this is an amazing everyday watch that you could have one and done, right, for some people, and they do. Or this is just a great little pickup to add into your collection. It's so amazing that I want to get the tan one. I think it's the SNK809, if I'm not mistaken. And then there is the illustrious cherry red, which those are ridiculous. They're rare. They're, above $500 for a watch that, again, is an entry-level piece. But I think that, anyone that would be kind of inquiring, should I get this watch over some other watch? If you get this, 9 times out of 10 people are going to be like, this is amazing, and I'm going to keep this forever, right? Absolutely stunning. So, without me blabbering too much on about this, I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, please go ahead and give a like as well as subscribe. We just hit 2K, which is insane. More to come about, an event, surrounding the 2K. As well, if you're interested, go ahead and hit me up on Instagram, as it is something that I'm looking to grow, to get in contact with and more fellowship with my fans, as well as, companies and such like that as well. Most importantly, I appreciate you taking time to watch this video, as there's so many great content creators you could be watching, and you've watched my little channel over here. I hope everybody has a great rest of your week and stay safe. Peace.